That night I heard screams echo from the old chapel. Not cries for help, but the manic laughter of someone who was once a victim. 3 girls were dead, and 1 survivor returned from the grave with a secret darker than truth itself. The monster was born from pain, once bullied, now a ghost haunting an entire town. If you think this is just another family story, you're wrong. Subscribe now to catch the next gripping episodes from us. Snow smothered Hawthorne that February, falling in sheets thick enough to erase the world by midnight. It dulled the distant growl of truck engines, cloaked the crunch of boots on gravel, made even Main Street feel impossibly far from itself. Hawthorne, a town on the edge of nowhere in northern Canada, seemed to shrink in the cold, drawing its people behind foggy windows and heavy doors, each family nursing its own rituals against the endless winter. But this night, even the comfort of routine would shatter. In the hour when 4 girls vanished, when the heart of Hawthorne fell silent, leaving only the pulse of fear and the ghostly echo of a drum. Inside Hawthorne High's old gym, the yellow lights hummed with a tired persistence, refusing to give up warmth no matter how the wind moaned against the glass. 4 girls lingered in the stale air, their cheeks pink from exertion, bodies coiled with the last electricity of youth. Madison Lee drummed her fingers across the battered snare at center court, eyes, bright lips pressed in concentration as she counted out the rhythm that would define tomorrow's championship. Chloe Barrett, hair in wild blonde curls, swung a pom-pom in lazy circles, her laughter ricocheting off the bleachers, daring the cold to touch her. Harper Ellis, thin and restless, twirled a loose strand of hair and kept glancing at the scoreboard as if measuring how much time she had left before a curfew. Olivia Martin, quieter than the others, perched on the edge of the bleachers, gaze lost in the frosted window, drawn to something only she seemed to sense in the dark. They were the town's golden girls. Hawthorne's pride, the spark that brought neighbors out into the bitter wind every Friday night. On this night, though, their practice dragged past reason. Coach Callahan shouted from the hall that he was heading out. "Lock up when you're done." The click of his keys faded, the big door thudded shut, and the girls exchanged looks, suddenly aware that they were alone, 4 voices humming with nerves and hope, not quite ready to go home. The drum sat between them, steady as a heartbeat. Madison tapped a slow rhythm. Chloe grinned and tried a few steps. Harper snapped a Polaroid that caught the swirl of motion, then Olivia, restless, broke the spell. "Did you hear that?" Her words hung in the air, blending with the faint whine of the wind. The others shook their heads. Madison shrugged, pretending she didn't notice the goosebumps prickling her arms. "Probably just the storm," she said, but her voice was thin, not quite convincing. Chloe threw her jacket on and made a show of bravado, but Harper's smile faded. The shadows felt heavier now. Olivia stared into the darkness beyond the bleachers, as if expecting to see something moving out there, something watching them from the edge of the world. The clock above the court flickered 9:52, then hesitated as if time itself was unsure whether to go on. In that moment, the air felt thick electric. A hush that wasn't peace but warning. Chloe's phone buzzed in her bag. She pulled it out, frowned at the dead battery, and tossed it aside, rolling her eyes. "Figures," she muttered, but no one laughed. Beyond the gym's walls, Hawthorne kept to its routines. At the Lee house, Carol sprinkled parsley over a lasagna, checking the window every few minutes for headlights in the drive. Don Barrett, alone in his garage, hunched over a broken snowblower, a beer sweating in his fist as the radio warbled out some tired country song. At the Ellis's, Harper's little brother tried to build a snow fort on the porch, fingers red and raw, casting hopeful glances down the street. Olivia's grandmother, wrapped in 3 blankets, hummed an old folk tune by the fire, the sound of her knitting needles, the only sign of life in the house. Across the street, the snow kept falling, erasing footsteps, blurring the edges of things. It softened the sound of the first distant siren, masked the flash of blue light as a police cruiser crept past the school windows, fogged with worry. In the gym, the girls gathered their things. Madison's scarf, green with gold stripes, was nowhere to be found. Harper patted the floor, finding only dust. Chloe teased her for being dramatic, but her heart wasn't in it. The night had shifted, and now even laughter couldn't hold off the cold. Suddenly, a bang rattled the side door. 4 heads jerked up, eyes wide. Madison straightened. Probably just the wind, she repeated, but this time nobody believed her. Silence pressed in, thick and slow, as if the whole world was holding its breath. After a long moment, Olivia grabbed her coat. "Let's go," she whispered, and the four filed out together. Shoes squeaking against the slick gym floor, shadows trailing behind them like secrets. They never made it home. In the first hour, nobody noticed. Mothers set places at the table, certain the girls were lingering over milkshakes at the diner. Fathers glanced at clocks, annoyed but unworried. By 10:30, unease began to pool in the corners of their hearts. At 11, Carol Lee called Madison's cell voicemail. Don texted Chloe, no reply. Harper's mom flicked the porch light off and on a silent code for "come home." Olivia's grandmother dozed in her chair, the fire gone to embers. By midnight, panic bloomed. The first calls went out. "Is Madison at your house? Have you seen Chloe? Harper said she was with you. Did she leave yet? Olivia's not answering. Do you know where she is?" The answer's always no, echoed through the telephone wires, turning hope into dread. Within minutes, Hawthorne came alive. Flashlights bobbed through swirling snow boots, trampled fresh drifts. Searchers called the girls' names into the dark, their voices swallowed by wind. The police radio chirped with static. "Last seen at the school. Check the gym, check the parking lot." An officer swept the lot with his light, found nothing but tire tracks disappearing into white. The janitor, roused from bed, insisted he'd locked up before leaving. He'd called out, heard nothing. He swore it. The gym was empty. Drum left at center court, a single pom-pom half buried in the snow by the side door. No signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away, just the bitter cold swallowing evidence, erasing all but the question, where did they go? Rumors kindled like dry brush. Some swore they'd seen a strange van near the school, a white one, maybe blue, maybe not there at all. Others insisted the girls had snuck off to the quarry, or hitched a ride to the city, chasing dreams bigger than Hawthorne. But as the search stretched into dawn, darker stories took root. Someone mentioned the old church on the hill, a place with a bad history where shadows pooled even on the brightest days. Whispers of cults, rituals, sacrifices, nonsense. The grown-ups scoffed, but no one slept easy. In the days that followed, every theory found a believer. Chloe's boyfriend insisted she would never run away. Madison's teachers recalled a fight in the hall. Voices raised something about secrets best kept. The internet buzzed with speculation, organ traffickers working the highway, revenge by a rival squad, a ghost story come true. The girls' faces, smiling and oblivious, beamed from posters in every shop window, every lamppost, every Facebook feed. A reward was posted. People volunteered in droves, scouring the woods, the riverbanks, the abandoned barns. Dogs sniffed the ground, shivering, barking at nothing. Night after night, vigils filled the school's parking lot. Friends huddled around the drum, beating out the rhythm the girls had last played, each boom echoing like a heartbeat in the frozen dark. Mothers wept quietly, holding hands, reciting prayers that tasted of desperation. Fathers hovered at the edge, fists clenched, eyes scanning the horizon for movement. Theories grew wilder. Some whispered of a debt unpaid. "You know Chloe's dad? He's got enemies." Others nodded knowingly about the strange things that happened after dark, the stories their parents used to scare them into obedience. But beneath the bravado, fear hollowed them out. Hawthorne wasn't special. They realized it was vulnerable. The cold had always protected them, they believed kept danger at bay. Now the cold felt like a shroud. The media descended their vans, crowding the curb, their bright lights burning away any comfort left in the night. Cameras panned across the snow-draped gym, caught the solemn faces of the families as they clung to one another. Every news anchor ended the broadcast with a question. How could 4 girls disappear without a trace? By the end of that week, Hawthorne was no longer a town on the edge of nowhere. It was the center of a nightmare. Every conversation, every classroom, every checkout line was thick with speculation and grief. Children watched their parents with new wariness. Teenagers, once invincible, checked in hourly promises made to mothers with trembling hands. The old-timers shook their heads, muttering about the things the snow could hide, the sins a small town could never quite forget. And always there was the drum. Some claimed to hear it late at night, echoing from the gym, 3 slow beats and a pause, a summons for the lost to come home. Others swore they saw figures moving at the edge of the woods, just out of sight. Shadows flickering in the headlights as they sped home before curfew. No one felt safe. As winter deepened, hope thinned to a desperate thread. The Lee house, once filled with laughter, grew silent rooms, left untouched in case Madison returned. The Barretts left the porch light burning, an unspoken promise. Harper's brother lined up her shoes by the door every night waiting. Olivia's grandmother kept knitting, making scarves no one would ever wear. Spring crept in tentative, but the thaw brought no answers. The drum gathered dust. The gym was scrubbed clean, the court refinished, but the echo of the lost girls lingered. Hawthorne's heart beat on, but it beat differently now, slower, heavier, afraid of what might still be hiding in the cold. The girls' names became a prayer, a curse, a story told in hushed voices by firelight. And still somewhere beneath the snow and silence, the truth waited unseen, untouched, keeping time with the haunted rhythm of a drum that no one dared play. Nothing would ever be the same again. Snow burned the skin raw, left a ring of ice at every collar, crept into gloves, boots, and even the marrow of hope. Hawthorne woke on that morning to the kind of cold that cracked trees and split faith. But it wasn't the weather that turned the town brittle. It was the echo of 4 missing names. Madison Lee, Chloe Barrett, Harper, Ellis, Olivia Martin, scattered through radiostatic, urgent whispers and the wail of sirens that never seemed to draw closer to an answer. It began with lines of police cruisers nosing through dawn's gray light headlights, blurred by swirling flakes. Officers slammed doors, stamping feet for warmth as they split into teams, each armed with hastily printed photographs, radios hissing with clipped commands. Sheriff Donahue, lines on his face deeper than usual, drew a shaky breath and pointed toward the woods behind the high school. "They're out there somewhere," he said. Voice cracked but steady. "Nobody gives up. Not today." Civilians joined before breakfast, teachers in parkas, zipped-over pajamas. Volunteers armed with thermoses of black coffee and determination, mothers with red-rimmed eyes clutching cell phones. They fanned out across Hawthorne's white-capped fields, forming chains to push through knee-high snow. The search became a ritual, a way of keeping fear at bay. Call the names, push forward, check every hollow, every shed, every drift that could be hiding something no one wanted to find. At the Lee home, Carol packed a backpack with snacks Madison liked, a set of gloves, a scarf, her daughter's favorite cherry chapstick. She handed it to a deputy at the door, her hands trembling but her words firm. "You'll need this when you find her. She always gets cold." In the Barrett house, Don's anger boiled over into action. He threw on his hunting boots, grabbed a flashlight, and set off alone, cutting across yards, not waiting for police or neighbors. He checked the ice on Miller's Pond, banged on the doors of the shuttered diner, glared at the vacant lot where trouble sometimes grew like weeds. He found nothing but his own fear reflected back at him in the frozen glass of every storefront. The Ellis family split up. Harper's mom, face set in lines of stubborn hope, joined a search party on snowmobiles combing the old railway tracks. Her father manned the phone tree, calling every parent, every friend, every teacher. "Please just call if you hear anything at all." Harper's little brother watched from the window, one mittened hand pressed to the glass, waiting for headlights that never appeared. Olivia's grandmother, Ruth Martin, set a pot of soup simmering on the stove, as if Olivia might burst through the door any minute, cheeks, red, arms full of snow, complaining about the cold. Ruth prayed in whispers, old words half-remembered from childhood, bargaining with a God she wasn't sure ever listened to Hawthorne. By noon, the river was lined with footprints and shouts. Deputies probed at the edges of the frozen water with sticks, careful not to break the crust, terrified of what might lie below. Men with chainsaws cut holes at the shallow bend, ice fog rising in clouds as they lowered spotlights to peer into blackness. Each time they found nothing but broken reeds and old fears. Helicopters droned overhead, spotlights slicing through trees, illuminating nothing but crows and the ghosts of last summer. Dogs from the city barked themselves hoarse, their noses pressed to scraps of scarf, a mitten. The battered edge of a sneaker, nothing conclusive, nothing hopeful. Still, the searchers pressed on, shouting the names into the white void, their words drifting up and away like smoke. Inside the Lee house, the waiting became a second storm. Carol moved through the rooms, picking up Madison's discarded sweater, refolding it, smoothing the pillow on her bed, opening her closet just to breathe in the lingering scent: grapefruit shampoo, cheap perfume, a trace of Jim's socks. She sat on the edge of the bed and remembered the way Madison laughed, the sharp edges of her defiance, the promise in her voice. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll always come home." But Madison was not home. Neither was Chloe. Don Barrett began to turn on his neighbors, his voice rising with each hour, blaming the police for incompetence, the school for neglect, the town for being too trusting. "This doesn't just happen," he raged to the crowd gathered at the corner store. "Someone knows something. Someone's hiding it." His anger burned hot enough to melt snow, but not enough to bring Chloe back. In a sunlit memory, Chloe twirled in the kitchen, music blaring, her mother cheering as she practiced routines with a wooden spoon for a baton. Chloe's boyfriend, Tyler Henson, watched from the doorway, his shy smile growing as she danced the future, a golden thing, glittering just out of reach. Now Tyler drove up and down every side street, stopping at every mailbox, every alleyway, hoping for a sign. Anything, any reason to believe the world hadn't slipped off its axis. Harper's mom remembered the last conversation with her daughter, a rushed goodbye. Harper promising she'd be home for dinner, her hair still damp from the shower, eyes bright with secrets. Now the house echoed with silence, broken only by the sound of Harper's brother's toy train circling the living room, the whistle shrill and senseless in the stillness. Ruth Martin clutched Olivia's journal, flipping through the pages for a clue, a sign, a secret that might explain it all. She remembered Olivia as a little girl, hands sticky with jam, always asking impossible questions. Where do people go when they disappear? Ruth had always answered, no one just disappears. Livy, now, she wasn't so sure. The town's teachers wept in the faculty lounge, their voices hushed as they recounted small slights and moments missed. Mrs. Willoughby, the English teacher, remembered Madison's essay on hope, how she'd stayed after class to argue about happy endings. She said, "Some stories are too dark for hope, but that's exactly when you need it most." Mrs. Willoughby closed her eyes and willed the story to find its ending. Coach Callahan was questioned twice, sweat beading on his brow despite the cold. He swore he'd locked up, that the girls had been in high spirits, that nothing seemed amiss. But his words grew thin with repetition, hollowed out by guilt. He replayed the last moments. "You girls need a ride," he'd asked, but they'd waved him off, confident and laughing, a fortress of friendship around them. Rumors multiplied, fueled by desperation and fear. Some pointed fingers at the new math teacher, too quiet, too new to town. Others blamed the janitor, Mr. Blackwell, a man with an old criminal record and a haunted look. The police checked alibis, combed through call logs, followed every lead to its cold dead end. Through it all, Hawthorne moved like a body in shock. The bakery gave away bread to searchers. The church opened its doors to anyone needing warmth or prayer. The high school gym became a staging ground, maps, photos, timelines spread across tables, coffee growing cold in abandoned mugs. The names, Madison, Chloe, Harper, Olivia, became incantations, repeated in every room, every radio broadcast, every sleepless midnight. By the second night, exhaustion had set in. Voices cracked, boots wore through, searchers staggered, some on the edge of hypothermia. Still, they pressed on, haunted by the possibility. Just maybe the girls were out there waiting, needing to be found. Fathers called out into the wind, voices raw, promising anything for an answer. Mothers scrawled notes to tape on lampposts. "We love you. Come home." No questions asked. In the dark, old grievances emerged. Friends accused each other of knowing more than they said. A fight broke out in the school parking lot, a desperate flare of violence that fizzled just as quickly, leaving only more tears. The mayor appeared on TV, his words as frozen as the river. "We will not stop. We will bring them home." In rare quiet moments, grief drifted in and out of the rooms. Carol Lee lay on Madison's bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering the night they danced in the kitchen to an old Springsteen song, Madison, standing on her feet, both of them spinning until they were dizzy. She remembered Madison's fear of storms, how she'd always come running when the thunder shook the house, whispering, Don't leave me." Now the storm was silent, and Carol would have given anything to hear her daughter's footsteps in the hall. Don Barrett sat on the porch, a shotgun across his knees, scanning the road for headlights, for shadows, for monsters. Chloe's mother baked cinnamon bread, filling the house with the scent of better days. She set the loaves on the table uneaten, as if Chloe might come home hungry. Harper's brother lined up her shoes one by one on the doormat, his own form of hope. He slept in her bed, face buried in her pillow, dreaming of the day she'd return and find him there. Olivia's grandmother sat by the window, knitting scarves she'd never give away, lips moving in prayer. She listened for the sound of Olivia's laugh, the thud of her backpack on the stairs, the familiar clatter of the front door. Every noise outside became a reason to hope, then a reason to cry. Other voices joined the chorus of grief. Tyler, Chloe's boyfriend, wept into his jacket on the school bleachers, remembering the taste of her lip gloss, the secret plans they'd made for spring break. "I'd trade places with her," he confessed to no one, voice muffled by snow. Madison's best friend, Caitlin, left a stack of notes by the old maple tree where they'd once carved their initials, each letter a plea. "Please, wherever you are, forgive me for not being there." Mrs. Willoughby wrote letters to the missing girls, tucking them into the back of her lesson plan book. Coach Callahan, sleep-deprived and raw, called each family, offering apologies that never felt like enough. The search continued. News vans lined the roads, reporters shivering in thin jackets, searching for angles, for sound bites, for a way to sell the suffering of a small town. Some families welcomed the attention. Maybe someone somewhere had seen something. Others resented it, wanting only to grieve in peace, to hold hope close and private. As days blurred into each other, the lines between hope and despair thinned. The Barretts hired a private investigator, a man who carried a gun and a photograph, who promised results but delivered only questions. The Lees met with a psychic who claimed to see visions of water, of darkness, of 4 girls waiting. The Martins organized a candlelight vigil on the school's front steps, every face lit with sorrow and longing. But nothing, no prayer, no anger, no bribe, brought the girls home. Winter gripped Hawthorne by the throat. Families retreated to their homes, clutching hope to their chests like a fragile dying bird. The searchers dwindled, the volunteers exhausted. Still, every morning, Carol Lee checked Madison's voicemail, leaving a new message each day. "It's Mom. I love you. Please just call me." Every evening, Don Barrett walked the perimeter of their property, boots crunching the ice shotgun slung over his shoulder. Chloe's room remained untouched, the bed made the window frostbitten. Harper's brother waited at the window. Olivia's grandmother set the table for 2. In the gym, the drum sat alone on the court, its surface dusty. The sticks crossed in silent vigil. Sometimes when the wind howled, people said they could hear the faintest echo of a rhythm, 4 beats, then silence like a heartbeat, a memory, a promise that the lost were not forgotten. The whole town learned how to live in the space between hope and despair, between memory and loss. For Hawthorne, nothing would ever be simple again. Each family clung to what they could love, routine, the ritual of waiting, while the world outside moved on. Indifferent, the snow falling, until it seemed nothing could ever grow here again. But beneath it all, buried under ice, under grief, under all the things left unsaid, something waited. Something that would one day demand to be found. 10 years is a long time. But in Hawthorne, sorrow does not age. It freezes suspended in the marrow of the town, like ice beneath topsoil, persistent and unseen. Hawthorne changed in all the ways small towns do after tragedy. Storefronts came and went. The high school got a new gym with gleaming floors and skylights that poured indifferent sunlight over old scars. There was a new mayor, new strip mall, new faces behind the bakery counter. But everyone who was here in 2002 carried the same shadow, the invisible weight of 4 missing girls and all that was lost in the bitter cold that year. The names Madison Lee, Chloe Barrett, Harper Ellis, and Olivia Martin had become both a legend and a wound. At first, there were annual vigils reporters and endless speculation. Flyers, faded candles guttered the world. Outside, Hawthorne stopped asking questions, but the town itself could not let go. The drum was long gone, but in its place in the hallway beside the new gym, they built a wall. brick and stone chiseled with the girls' initials, each one crowned by a small bronze handprint. Underneath was a single phrase picked by the families: "We remember. We wait." It is the kind of thing that newcomers find touching. But for those who lived through that winter, it is a reminder as persistent as the frostbite that never fully healed. Hawthorne's best and worst kept secret. The Lee house was sold. Carol left town, headed west to live with her sister and start over in a city where people did not know her daughter's face. Don Barrett drank himself out of his marriage. Chloe's mother got remarried, moving across the lake with a man who tried, sometimes painfully, to be a new father to a memory. The Ellises quietly divided up Harper's things and donated them to charity, except for a shoebox of photos kept at the back of a closet. Olivia's grandmother died the spring after the 3rd anniversary, her heart finally giving out her house, left to distant cousins. Time did what it does. It fractured, faded, reshaped, and left Hawthorne lopsided, limping a town with a secret language of glances and silences. Still, some things refused to change. Every year on the anniversary, bouquets appeared on the gym steps, sometimes from family, sometimes from strangers who remembered or needed to be remembered. At graduation, the principal always left 4 empty chairs up front, draped in school colors. No one spoke of it, but everyone noticed. Into this hush stepped Eric Walker, the youngest sheriff in Hawthorne's history. 30 years old, with the build of a runner, short dark hair, the set jaw of someone who grew up fighting against a world that would not budge. Eric had left Hawthorne the year after the disappearances, his family moving south, after his older brother Mark, one of the volunteer searchers, never quite recovered from that January. Eric did not come back until after college, after police academy, after the world taught him to keep secrets behind a badge. He returned for reasons he would never say aloud. Some said it was a calling, others said it was guilt, but in truth, it was grief, a quiet burning need to rewrite a story that had always ended with someone gone. Hawthorne had changed in his absence, but the ache in his chest was the same. His first days as sheriff were thick with awkward welcomes and sidelong glances. The old guard watched him with folded arms and guarded eyes. To them, Eric was still a kid, a city-trained outsider too young to know how deep the pain ran here. He walked the streets anyway, boots echoing on cracked sidewalks, nodding to shopkeepers who remembered him as a boy. The ache was always worse near the high school, where the new gym loomed like a monument to the past. The wall of hands was just inside the glass doors, shining with the fingerprints of 10 years' worth of visitors, each one pausing, pressing a palm against cold stone. Eric did it himself once, when no one was looking, his hand far larger than the delicate prints in bronze. But the gesture comforted him in ways he didn't expect. He did not have to face it alone. Jenna Scott was already waiting for him at the station when he arrived, standing by the coffee maker in a crisp shirt and boots, hair pulled back, eyes as sharp as a hawk's. Jenna was local, born and bred, second in her class, star soccer player back in Hawthorne after years in Toronto. She could talk anyone into anything, laugh off the grimmest news, and move through the town's invisible minefields with ease. They made an odd pair. Eric and Jenna. He was quiet, methodical, a man of slow-burning anger and dry humor. She was fast-talking, warm, unafraid to prod old wounds if it meant making progress. But they understood each other's silences the way people who know loss do. It did not take long for the town's old pain to circle them like wolves. The office was filled with files on burglaries, small-town squabbles, lost dogs, and tax disputes. But the real work, the thing that Eric felt burning every time he looked at the wall of hands, was always waiting underneath. He felt it most acutely one late afternoon, after a particularly bitter council meeting, where the subject of moving on had come up yet again. Eric had sat there silent as Councilman Parker blustered about letting the past be the past, and someone else muttered about focusing on the future, not old ghosts. Only Jenna caught Eric's look, the way his jaw tightened. As the meeting adjourned, she squeezed his arm, a small rebellion against Hawthorne's collective amnesia. They found themselves at the school that evening, the sky bruised with clouds. Inside the gym, kids' voices echoed, sneakers squeaked, and banners for new championship teams fluttered from the rafters. Yet there was a chill at the far end by the wall, where the bronze handprints glowed in the half-light. Eric and Jenna stood before it, The room empty now, except for the two of them. Eric reached out, running a thumb across Madison's initials. "My brother never got over this," he murmured. "None of us did." Jenna nodded, tracing Chloe's print with her own. "No one does. We just get better at pretending." Later that week, a reporter from the Hawthorne Gazette stopped by the station. He was working on a 10 years later piece, all careful questions and notepads. He wanted quotes about healing, about hope. Eric answered politely, but inside he felt the anger tightening, a sense that the town was desperate to box up its sorrow, to paint over the cracks in its foundation. After the reporter left, Jenna handed Eric a mug of coffee and said, "They're all lying. No one's healed. We're all just quieter now." It was true. Hawthorne had papered over its wounds, but never mended them. The high school rebuilt its gym, but the hallway still smelled faintly of dust and liniment, and the wall of hands was the first thing every freshman saw. Kids gossiped about the disappearances. New students dared each other to sneak into the old fields after dark. Some whispered that the girls had run away and were living wild-free somewhere out west. Others said their ghosts haunted the school, leaving cold spots in empty classrooms or making the lights flicker late at night. The families, those who remained, lived in different towns, different houses, or just different lives. Carol Lee sent Christmas cards to old friends each year with fewer words. Don Barrett was last seen at the edge of town, a shadow in the window of a rented trailer. Harper's brother, now in high school himself, avoided the gym, afraid of the pitying looks. The Martins' house was rented out, its garden overgrown, but sometimes a neighbor left wildflowers on the porch in memory. 10 years is enough time for hope to curdle into something sharp. There was resentment now, a bitterness that new kids didn't know the story, that teachers avoided the subject, that the world had moved on, without the girls, without Hawthorne. Eric heard it in the bar, late at night, when old men swapped theories and mothers wept quietly over their drinks. He saw it in the way doors closed a little too quickly, when he walked by, in the way neighbors looked away, when his patrol car rolled through. Jenna was a lightning rod for these emotions. She had been in elementary school when the girls vanished, too young to understand, but old enough to be shaped by the fear that followed. She remembered police at the door, her mother clutching her tighter at bedtime, the endless questions in the classroom. Now she carried those memories into every investigation, never letting herself forget. She refused to call the girls victims. To her, they were fighters' girls who deserved more than to be reduced to a headline. Eric trusted her instincts, her willingness to ask hard questions. Together they poked at the town's soft spots, attending meetings at the school, speaking with teachers, following up on anonymous tips that still trickled in each year, most of them pranks or wild goose chases. But once in a while, a detail caught Eric's attention, a forgotten locker, a piece of jewelry in the lost and found, a name in an old yearbook. He started keeping a notebook, his own case file scribbled with details and timelines, names and rumors, a living map of a wound no one wanted to touch. There were quiet victories too. Eric and Jenna built trust with new families, ran workshops at the school on safety and resilience. They brought in counselors, started a mentorship program for girls who felt out of place, left behind. At the first basketball game of the season, Eric stood in the doorway watching the cheer squad march onto the court, new faces, but the same sharp joy in their eyes. The drumbeat was gone, but the spirit had survived. Still, on cold nights, the past pressed in. Sometimes Eric drove by the Lee house or the field where they'd found Madison's scarf. Sometimes he pulled over, killed the engine, and listened for the echo of footsteps, for a voice on the wind, for something to finally break the spell that held Hawthorne in its grip. One morning, Jenna found Eric at his desk, eyes red from another sleepless night. She set down 2 coffees, sat across from him, and said, "We can't fix what happened, but we can decide what happens next." He nodded, grateful, not trusting himself to speak. On the 10th anniversary, the town held a memorial service at the school. The wall of hands gleamed in the autumn sun, each print a testament to memory and mourning. Eric and Jenna stood at the edge of the crowd, listening as the principal read the names, as a chorus of voices rose in a promise. We remember. We wait. In that moment, it felt possible, if only for a breath, that Hawthorne could become something new, something whole that the hands on the wall could reach into the future as well as the past. And for the first time in years, Eric allowed himself to hope. The sun hadn't yet risen above the pine ridges when Eric Walker opened his inbox and found the message that would shift the fault lines beneath Hawthorne all over again. It sat there wedged between city council spam and a polite but urgent note from the county budget office, a plain subject line for Sheriff Walker. He clicked already, bracing for another complaint about stray dogs or someone's trash collection. Instead, there was a single line, the font default nothing but the words, "Look in the abandoned chapel." No greeting, no signature. The timestamp read, 3:12 a.m. The sender's address was a tangle of random numbers and letters, a domain Eric didn't recognize, something built to vanish. He read the line 3 times, heart-knocking in his ribs. The abandoned chapel. The old St. Agnes left to rot after the fire 2 decades back, a place half the town was afraid to mention, even in daylight. Kids dared each other to break in on Halloween, but no one stayed long, not with the smell of mold and burnt wood, the sagging roof, the altar blackened by years of neglect. It had always been a backdrop for nightmares, the kind of place parents mentioned in warnings. Stay away from the chapel. Nothing good ever happens there. Eric stared at the screen. The room was cold. Outside, the wind scraped bare branches against the station's windows, as if impatient to get in. He felt the world contract, the past and present pinched together in a single fragile moment. He read it again, just to be sure. Look in the abandoned chapel. His first instinct was caution. Anonymous tips, especially about the old case, almost always led nowhere. Angry exes, drunk pranksters. People hoping to insert themselves into Hawthorne's one enduring legend. He should have flagged the email, passed it to Jenna, filed it with the hundreds of cranks and false leads that had come and gone in the last decade. But he didn't, because of the way his heart stuttered as he read. Because of the promise he'd made at Madison's funeral. A promise whispered against the coffin after everyone else had gone. I'll find out what happened. I won't let you become another secret here. He forwarded the message to Jenna with a curt, "Let's talk. Urgent." Then he sat back, the chair groaning beneath him, and let the memory roll over him. The memory of that night, the search, the frozen hope, the silence that fell on the town and never quite lifted. Within the hour, Jenna was in his office, eyes narrowed, her coat still flecked with morning frost. She read the email, jaw tensed, the muscle in her cheek twitching as she processed. "This could be nothing," she said quietly. "But we can't ignore it." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They printed the message, folded it into a file, and began running down what little there was to run. Jenna traced the IP address, but it was a dead end, rerouted through layers of proxy servers. Eric made a list of everyone in town, with a key to the chapel, not many, and most of them long since moved away or died. The church property was still on the tax rolls, but nobody paid attention to it. The city had tried to sell it, but nobody wanted the headaches or the ghosts. As the day crawled on, word leaked out. Someone saw Jenna in the file room, and by lunchtime, half the department knew there was a fresh clue in the missing girl's case. Hawthorne, never short on theories, began to buzz anew. By afternoon, the phone lines lit up. Carol Lee called from British Columbia, her voice trembling with something between hope and terror. "Is it true, Eric? Did you find something?" He swallowed, careful not to promise more than he could deliver. "It's just a tip, Carol. We're checking it out." She wept anyway, soft and hopeless. "If you find anything, please just let me know. I still have the same number." He promised, even though it felt like a sin. One by one, the other families checked in, drawn out of exile by rumors, and the first hint of movement in years. Chloe's mother called stiff and formal, her new husband's voice in the background. "I told myself I'd stop thinking about it," she confessed. "But if there's a chance, any chance she's out there, I want to know." Harper's father. His voice ragged, asked to be kept informed, then hung up before Eric could finish the sentence. Olivia's cousin emailed from Montreal, the subject line as stark as the day she vanished. "Please, anything." Jenna fielded the calls as best she could, offering comfort where she could, refusing to speculate. When she hung up after the fifth call, she found Eric at the window, staring out at the town square dusted with new snow. "You okay?" she asked, voice low. He didn't turn around. "It's starting all over again, isn't it? All the old wounds, all the old ghosts." She touched his shoulder. "If there's something out there, if there's hope, we owe it to them, to their families, to ourselves." That night, Eric drove home, but never made it inside. He sat in his truck engine, idling radio low, the world outside thick with the hush of snow. The sky was low and heavy stars blotted out the street lamps, casting pale halos on the blanketed lawns. He closed his eyes and let the memories spill over him. He remembered his brother Mark, the night of the search, hands bleeding from digging through ice and brush face drawn in the blue light of the police tape. He remembered his mother, pale and silent, hugging herself on the front steps, her breath clouding the air. He remembered Madison, younger than him by 4 years, always teasing, always brave, the only person in the family who never gave up on him when he got into trouble. He remembered the promise. "I'll find out. I won't forget. I won't let them." Sleep would not come, so he drove instead. Past the new high school gym, the wall of hands glowing beneath the security lights. Past the library where they used to wait for their mom reading until closing. Past the church where the funerals were held, the pews still creaking with the memory of sorrow. Everywhere he went, he saw their faces on flyers, in old photographs, in the tired lines of the parents left behind. It was almost 3 a.m. when he found himself parked outside the abandoned chapel headlights, painting warped shadows across the peeling white clapboards. The building huddled in the snow, its steeple crooked, the stained glass boarded up the front door chained. The sign, St. Agnes, still hung by a single rusted nail swinging in the wind. He turned off the engine and let the silence rush in. It felt like the first breath after drowning. He thought of the email. Look in the abandoned chapel. He thought of Madison, Chloe, Harper, Olivia, their laughter echoing in his mind, the way they used to own the world, bright and unbreakable. The chain was thick with rust, the padlock frozen. He didn't bother trying to break in. Not yet. He just sat there staring at the dark windows, waiting for a sign. Nothing moved inside. The only sound was the groan of timbers shifting under the weight of old snow. He stayed until the sky started to lighten at the edges, pink and bruised. The town still asleep, the chapel still silent. As he drove away, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. A shiver of hope, electric and sharp, a warning and a promise. The next morning, he called Jenna before sunrise. She answered on the second ring, her voice rough with sleep. "Let's check it out," he said. Together. They met at the station, gathered tools, flashlights, evidence bags. Jenna packed her camera. They said nothing about what they might find. It was safer that way. On the way to the chapel, Eric broke the silence. "You know, my mom never forgave herself for letting Madison stay late that night. She always thought it was her fault." Jenna glanced over. "We all blame ourselves. It's how grief works." He nodded. "But I promised I'd keep looking. For her. For all of them." The chapel loomed before them, its shadow swallowing the drive. Jenna shivered, pulling her collar tight. "You ever been inside?" Eric shook his head. "Not since I was a kid. Used to come here on dares. Place scared the hell out of me." They cut the chain, pushed the door open. The smell of mildew, old smoke, and rot rushed out, thick and sour. Their flashlights swept across warped pews, piles of broken hymnals, graffiti scrawled in adolescent hands. The altar was blackened, a melted crucifix sagging on the wall behind it. They searched for hours, working in silence, every footstep stirring dust that glittered in their beams. They found remnant beer cans, a dirty blanket, animal bones. Nothing human. In the choir loft, Jenna found a pile of old cheerleading flyers, dated the week before the girls disappeared. Eric stared at them, pulse pounding, trying to find meaning in the randomness. Nothing at first. Then in the vestry, a trap door, old, hidden beneath a stack of broken chairs. Eric knelt, fingers trembling as he pried it open. A rush of cold air. Stairs descending into darkness. He paused, heart thundering, every sense alive. Jenna whispered, "You ready?" He swallowed. "Yeah." They went down together. The basement was cramped, the air thick with mold. Their lights caught glimmers, shards of glass, a length of rope, a scrap of blue fabric. In the far corner, a wooden box, half rotted. Eric knelt, breath held, and opened it. Inside, photographs, dozens of them, some Polaroids, some printed. Faces he recognized. Madison, Chloe Harper, Olivia laughing, posing, caught unaware in the hallways at the diner on the gym floor. Some had dates scribbled on the back, some notes in handwriting he didn't recognize. Among them, a bracelet, Madison's, the one she never took off. Jenna gasped, covering her mouth. These are real. These were never in evidence. Eric felt the world tilt past and present colliding. Someone had been here. Someone had kept these things. Someone wanted them found. It wasn't a body. It wasn't closure. But it was hope, a sign at last that the story wasn't over. They packed the photos, the bracelet, the box. Locked the chapel behind them. Drove back to the station in silence, hearts hammering. As the sun rose over Hawthorne, painting the snow gold and blood red, Eric sent a single text to Carol Lee, to all the families. We found something. I can't say more yet, but we're not done, I promise. Then he sat at his desk, the box before him, and let the tears come hot and silent. He'd broken the spell. The truth was out there waiting. And for the first time in 10 years, Hawthorne held its breath, not in fear, but in hope. The snow came down harder that night, burying every sidewalk, every memory. The wind lashed against the windshield as Eric steered his unmarked car off the main road, following the faint tire tracks from earlier that day. Beside him, Jenna sat, silent, flashlight already resting in her gloved hand, her breath fogging the window. Headlights stretched across a white field and glinted off the warped wooden steeple of St. Agnes Chapel, barely visible through the shifting curtain of snow. They pulled off to the side, killing the engine, letting darkness swallow the last remnant of civilization behind them. For a long moment, neither of them moved, both listening to the relentless whisper of the storm, the way it muted everything but their own heartbeats. Eric reached for the evidence kit in the back seat. We go in quiet. If there's anyone watching, we don't want them knowing we're here. Jenna nodded, her jaw tight, her nerves coiled, sharp as wire. You really think someone could be living in there all this time? He hesitated, weighing the memory of that email, the way it had surfaced out of nowhere, the box of photographs, the bracelet. I think someone's been here. Maybe they never left. They stepped out into the blizzard, the wind biting through their coats, boots sinking in fresh drifts as they made their way up the icy path to the chapel. Jenna pressed her hand against the padlocked door, feeling the metal's frozen bite. Eric produced the bolt cutters from the kit, jaw clenched as he worked them over the rusted lock. The snap was louder than he expected, echoing off the stone walls, swallowed quickly by the wind. Inside, the world changed. They stepped into darkness so thick it felt like a presence. Jenna swept her flashlight in a slow arc, catching the ragged outlines of pews collapsing under the weight of years. Hymnals rotted into piles of mush, shards of colored glass from the broken windows, littering the aisles like forgotten candy. Smells like a tomb, she whispered. Eric grunted, moving forward, boots crunching over debris. Just remember where we parked. If something happens, get out. She managed a tight smile. I'm not leaving you. He didn't answer. Instead, he made his way up the nave, toward the ruined altar. Every step stirred up clouds of dust motes spinning in the beam of his light. Behind the altar, the blackened crucifix sagged like a warning. Jenna ran her hand over the scarred wood eyes, narrowing at the old scorch marks. They never rebuilt after the fire. Eric shook his head. No one wanted to. Town council argued for years. Too much bad luck. Their voices sounded foreign in that place, as if the chapel itself was listening. A sudden creak to their right made both of them freeze. Eric swung his light, heart thudding, but it was just a loose window shutter banging against the wall in the wind. He let out a slow breath. They split up, Eric searching the choir loft, Jenna circling the far aisles. Every corner offered up relics. A child's shoe half melted, a torn Bible with the cover missing, the charred remains of a candle. Nothing that belonged to the girls, nothing that answered the questions clawing at his mind. But there, at the end of the north aisle, Jenna found a door warped by moisture, barely hanging on its hinges. She called Eric over with a hiss, her voice barely above the wind. There's a room back here, not on the blueprints. He joined her, shining his light over the door. The wood was marked with strange looping symbols, graffiti or something older, half carved, half burned. His skin prickled. They pushed together. The door gave way with a screech, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into the earth. Pitch black, the air below sharp with the stink of rot and mold. Eric looked at Jenna, seeing his own fear reflected back. "If you want to stay up here," she cut him off. "No way." They descended, every step groaning under their weight. The further they went, the colder it got, until Eric's breath came in white puffs, his lungs burning. The flashlight beams bobbed ahead, dancing over stone walls, sweating with condensation, the mortar crumbling. The staircase ended in a cramped hallway lined with splintered doors. The first 2 rooms were empty, save for broken chairs and the gnawed bones of some long-dead animal. But the third door was closed, a new padlock shining in the dark. Jenna crouched, examining the lock. "Someone's been down here recently." "This is new." Eric dug out a set of picks, hands shaking only slightly. He worked in silence, heart hammering, until the lock popped free. He eased the door open. Inside was a room unlike anything he'd seen. Shelves lined the walls, packed with old cans, candles. More strange symbols painted in charcoal and blood. At the center of the room, on a battered table, sat a cassette recorder, its plastic casing yellowed with age. Around it were scattered personal items, a silver hairbrush engraved with CB, a red wallet, a set of keys with a rabbit's foot, a stack of Polaroids, some too warped to make out, but the faces unmistakable, smiling and alive. Jenna let out a gasp. "That's Chloe's brush. And Madison's keychain." "Oh my God." Eric forced himself to breathe, cataloging every detail. "Bag everything. Don't touch the tapes with your bare hands." As they worked, he caught sight of a mural covering the far wall. Figures danced in a circle, arms linked, faceless. Above them, a ring of fire painted in garish reds and yellows. In the center, 4 girls in blue and gold uniforms, their faces erased by streaks of black. Jenna stepped closer. "Who would do this?" Eric shook his head. "I don't know. But this is deliberate." He photographed everything. Every inch of the mural, every object. Jenna rifled through the tapes, her gloved fingers trembling. There are dates written on the labels, March 3rd, March 9th, March 15th. All from that year. Eric's eyes darted to a pile of papers stacked in a tin box beneath the table. He sifted through scribbled notes, song lyrics, some pages covered in frantic handwriting, prayers, or confessions. It was impossible to say. At the bottom, a drawing 4 stick figures standing in front of a house with a crooked steeple. A 5th figure drawn in red looming behind. A low creak echoed from upstairs. Both of them froze, listening. The silence that followed felt alive, charged with the kind of fear that leaves your skin buzzing. Jenna whispered, "Did you hear that?" Eric nodded, holding up a hand for quiet. He switched off his flashlight, plunging them into darkness. Above footsteps, a measured, deliberate tread moving across the boards. Eric's mind raced. Had someone followed them? Had the tipster come back to collect what he'd left behind? Or was it something older, something that had always lived in the chapel, feeding on secrets? He motioned Jenna to the corner behind a stack of crates. He drew his sidearm, heart thundering in his ear, straining to hear. The footsteps paused, then continued slower now, exploring. The sound of a door creaking, something heavy being dragged. Jenna's breath was shallow, her eyes huge in the glow of the emergency exit light. Eric mouthed, "Stay here," and crept toward the stairs, every sense stretched taut. He listened, counting the beats between each footfall, mapping the stranger's route in his head. Whoever it was moved with confidence, as if he or she knew the place by heart. Eric pressed himself against the stone, waiting for the right moment. The footsteps grew closer, then stopped at the top of the stairs. A beam of light swept down, slicing through the gloom, nearly catching the tip of his boot. He held his breath. The light wavered, then vanished as quickly as it had come. A door slammed shut. Silence. Eric waited, counting to 100, willing his heartbeat to slow. Then, as quietly as possible, he returned to Jenna. "We need to get out. Now." They bagged what they could, brush, wallet, keys, tapes, photos, the tin box. Eric scanned the room one last time, eyes lingering on the mural, on the strange sigils scrawled in blood and ash. He took more photos, knowing that if they left anything, it might be lost for good. They made their way up the stairs, pausing at each landing, listening. The main hall was empty, the pews still shrouded in darkness. The wind had picked up, shrieking through broken panes. Eric led Jenna to the side door, careful to leave no sign of their passage. Outside, the snow was coming down so hard it erased the world in every direction. Their car was half buried. Eric popped the trunk, stashed the evidence, eyes darting to the tree line, where he thought he saw a flicker of movement, gone in an instant. Maybe a trick of the headlights, maybe not. They drove in silence, the tires spinning as they crawled back to the main road. Eric gripped the wheel, every muscle tight. Jenna stared straight ahead, still clutching the cassette recorder, knuckles white. At the station, they locked the evidence in a cabinet, logged everything, changed out of their snow-soaked clothes. Only then did Eric let himself breathe. He turned to Jenna, voice hoarse. Someone was watching us. She nodded, eyes haunted. We're not alone in this. Someone knows we're getting close. He looked down at the cassette recorder, then back at the evidence table, the artifacts laid out like offerings. For the first time, the case felt less like a legend and more like a living, breathing animal, hungry, dangerous, waiting to lash out. Eric played the first tape, static roaring in the speakers. Then a burst of voices, girls laughing, then screaming. The sound distorted, distant, almost inhuman. He stopped the tape, bile rising in his throat. Jenna shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. Who would keep something like that? Who would make this place into a shrine? Eric had no answer. He paced the room, mind racing. Someone who wanted us to find it. Someone who needs us to know. As the night stretched on, the wind howled, the windows rattled. Eric watched the snow pile against the glass, feeling the invisible eyes still upon him. The old wounds of Hawthorne were bleeding again. But now there was evidence, physical, undeniable proof that the girls had been there, that someone had played a part in their story, long after the world had turned away. In the hours before dawn, Eric and Jenna pored over the tapes, the notes, the photos. They mapped every date, every symbol, every scrap of memory left in that basement shrine. Each piece was a thread, and as they followed it, they realized the truth: the past was not buried. It was alive, tangled in the rafters, the roots, the bones of Hawthorne itself. And somewhere out in the storm, someone else was watching, waiting for their next move. Eric looked at Jenna, his eyes dark with resolve and fear. We're in it now. No going back. She met his gaze, fierce and unyielding. We'll see this through. For them. The chapel's secrets were coming undone. The game had changed, and Hawthorne would never be the same. Back at the police station, the world outside was still a blur of white and wind, the windows iced over so thickly that only the yellow glow of the street lamp managed to cut through. Eric and Jenna sat in the evidence room. The tapes and artifacts spread before them like the bones of some ancient restless animal. The silence was suffocating, each of them aware of the significance of what lay inside those battered cassettes, neither quite ready to press play. Eric wiped his hands on his jeans, fingers trembling, the leftover cold from the chapel still gnawing at his bones. He picked up the recorder, the plastic oddly warm in his palm, and set one of the tapes into place. Jenna sat across from him, hunched forward, her eyes already shining with a mix of fear and anticipation. The air felt charged, as if every atom in the room was waiting to see what would happen next. He pressed play. At first, only static white noise, the crackle of time. Then a muffled click, a pause, and the faint sound of a girl's voice. Can you hear me, please, just if anyone finds this? The words cut out, replaced by a scuffle, someone sobbing, breath hitching. Another voice, different, higher, choked with panic. Jenna's hand flew to her mouth. It was Chloe. She would know that laugh, even twisted as it was by terror anywhere. There was a shuffling, a thud. Another voice, this one cold and unfamiliar, deepened by the cheap recorder's hiss. Shut up. You know the rules. More crying, pleading, the words fragmented by fear and the poor quality of the tape. I want to go home, please. I just want to... Shut up. No one's coming for you. You brought this on yourselves. Silence again. The next sound was the metallic scrape of a door. Then whispers, Madison, maybe trying to comfort the others, her voice a trembling thread. Stay quiet. We'll get out. Just hold on. Eric paused the tape. His hands were shaking so hard, he nearly dropped the recorder. Jenna's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away with fury, clenching her fists. Play the rest, she said, voice hoarse. He pressed play again, bracing himself. Now the tape crackled with the background hum of a heater, someone breathing heavily, moving in and out of frame. Then a sudden guttural shout, male, ragged with rage. Do you want me to hurt you again? A flurry of movement, a scream Harper by the sound of it. Then a slap, sharp and sickening, followed by another stretch of silence, longer this time. Broken only by the sound of someone sobbing, soft and desperate. After that, the voices on the tape began to unravel into fragments. Songs half-sung, childhood rhymes, prayers mumbled into the dark. Chloe's voice repeating her mother's phone number over and over like a spell. Madison whispering something about a hidden door, a symbol on the wall. Olivia barely audible, her voice almost a ghost. If anyone finds this, tell my grandma I tried. At the end, another male voice, not the first, but higher, nasal, urgent, slipping in and out of a whisper. Do you know why you're here? Because no one cares about little liars. You think you're special, but you're nothing. This town forgot you the moment you vanished. You're all alone. The tape whined, slowed, then clicked to a stop. Jenna covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. For a while there was only the sound of their breathing, the distant moan of the wind outside. Eric rewound the tape, listening again to certain parts, noting every word, every noise, every detail he could squeeze from the static. They moved on to the next tape. This one began with heavy footsteps, someone pacing. A girl humming a song from the radio, a decade ago, forever haunted now by its context. Snatches of conversation, as if the girls had managed to distract their captor for a few precious moments. If we tell you where the money is, will you let us go? Harper, bold as ever. A scoff from the adult, the clatter of something thrown against the wall. You think I care about your little games, about your secrets? And then for the first time, another adult voice, female, brittle edges honed by anger and pain. Stop it, Grace. Enough, they're just kids. A chill raced down Eric's spine. Jenna snapped her gaze to his eyes, wide. Grace? Grace Patterson? The new teacher? The one who always seemed to be around after hours, who had left town suddenly that spring, never saying goodbye. Eric froze, the tape, heart pounding. We need to pull her personnel file. Now. Jenna didn't need to be told twice. She bolted to the records room, digging through dusty boxes, papers yellowed with age, plastic folders brittle. Eric kept the tape running, scribbling notes as the voices played on. The girls' voices came and went, sometimes panicked, sometimes flat and numb, the sound of trauma making them older and younger at once. They talked about the days in captivity, counting cracks in the walls, carving messages into the wood with stolen pens, trying to remember what home felt like. They told stories to each other, shared secrets, sometimes fought. The terror was always close, seeping through in their words, in the way their laughter twisted to sobs. More than once, the tape caught the sound of a struggle, a scuffle, muffled screams, the heavy thud of fists, a girl begging for mercy. And through it all, the male voice sometimes pleading, sometimes threatening, always there. Eric didn't realize how much time had passed until Jenna returned, clutching a handful of folders. She dumped them on the table, breathless. Look at this, she said, shoving a file at him. He scanned the top sheet. Grace Patterson hired, January 2001, left March 2002. Reason for leaving, personal emergency, no forwarding address. Jenna rifled through the rest. There's more. Look. She pulled out a ledger, a list of bank transfers in small, cramped handwriting. Thousands of dollars moved in and out of accounts connected to Grace, to a few parents, and stunningly to one of the school's substitute teachers. Eric flipped through the folder, his mind racing. Why would a teacher need that much money moving around? Jenna shook her head, running a finger down the list. Look at the dates. Most of these transfers happened in the weeks before the girls vanished. Some are marked PTA donation, others just say miscellaneous expenses. And here, she pointed to a withdrawal on March 12th, the day after the girls disappeared. $10,000 cash gone. They stared at the numbers, a chill settling in. This was no random act, no one-time burst of violence. Someone had planned covered tracks, laundered guilt into paperwork. Eric moved to the next folder, scanning discipline reports from the months before the girls went missing. A pattern emerged, a series of escalating confrontations between Grace and the cheer squad. Madison cited for insubordination, Harper caught sneaking into the faculty lounge, Chloe written up for verbal disrespect. Grace's notes were clipped almost venomous. Student refuses to apologize. Hostile environment, lack of support from administration. Eric's head throbbed. He remembered the rumors, the whispered stories, after the disappearances, teachers bickering in the halls, someone yelling behind closed doors, kids coming home with bruises and no explanations. Why didn't anyone look at this harder? Jenna muttered. Why didn't the principal say anything? Eric flipped the folders shut, jaw clenched. Because they didn't want to believe someone in their circle could do this. Easier to blame a stranger. A sudden heavy silence hung between them. Then, as if on cue, the building seemed to settle, a low creak echoing down the hallway. Both of them glanced at the door, muscles tensed, but it was only the heating kicking on the pipes, groaning against the cold. Jenna pulled a yearbook off the shelf, flipping to the faculty page. Grace's pictures stared up at them, smiling, neat, nothing out of the ordinary. Next to her, the principal, 2 other teachers. A handful of students on the next page, names scrawled in blue ink: Chloe Barrett, Madison, Lee Harper Ellis, Olivia Martin. Jenna frowned. Wait, look at this. She pointed at a list of students below the cheer squad photo. 2 names had been blotted out with correction fluid, the print ghostly beneath the surface. Who are they? Eric asked. Jenna squinted, holding the page up to the light. It looks like Samantha White and Elena Rivera. She checked the index in the back. Both names appeared elsewhere in the book, but when she flipped to those pages, the pictures had been removed as if they'd never existed. Eric felt a shiver trace his spine. Why erase them? Why go to the trouble? Jenna rifled through more yearbooks, freshman, sophomore, junior years. Samantha and Elena showed up in early years, always in the background, at a party in the library on the soccer team. Then suddenly gone. No graduation photo, no senior quote, no trace in the school's official records after 2002. Were they connected to the girls? Jenna asked. Eric nodded slowly, remembering a rumor, something Mark had told him once in passing. I think so. Mark said Madison was close with Samantha, but after that winter, nobody talked about her anymore. Jenna sat back, running both hands through her hair. So someone not only took the girls, but erased their friends from the record. Why? Eric started to answer, but the recorder's tape clicked again, automatic rewind, and played the last fragment. A girl's voice, low, broken, barely a whisper. If you're listening, we didn't mean for this to happen. We just wanted her to stop. She wouldn't stop. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Then a crash, static, and the tape ran out. Neither of them moved for a long moment, letting the weight of what they just heard settle around them. Eric spoke first, his voice rough. This wasn't random. This was revenge. Someone wanted to hurt them. Someone wanted to make them disappear. Jenna nodded, eyes shining. And someone else wanted to make sure no one would remember them. They sat in silence, piecing together the evidence. Grace Patterson, mysterious money, erased students, angry confrontations, each a brick in a wall of conspiracy and pain that spanned a decade. As the first traces of dawn crept through the frosted glass, Eric rose, stretching stiff limbs, every muscle in his back aching with exhaustion and adrenaline. We're not done, he said quietly. We dig into Grace's past. We find out where she went, who she talked to, what she was running from. Jenna wiped her eyes, determination hardening her face. I'll go through the PTA records, bank accounts, anything I can get my hands on. Eric nodded. And I'll talk to Mark. Maybe he remembers something about Samantha and Elena, something he didn't think mattered back then. As they split up their tasks, the phone rang, startling both of them. Eric answered on the second ring. A shaky male voice on the other end. Sheriff Walker. Why? I think you should know something about the old chapel. I was there years ago. There were things, noises. Someone was living in the walls. Eric pressed for more, but the caller hung up the line dead. He scribbled down the number, another lead, to chase. Jenna turned to him, voice low. We need to go back to the chapel. There's more down there. I know it. Eric hesitated, remembering the footsteps, the eyes he felt watching them. But he nodded. "We'll go. But next time we won't go alone." As the sun climbed, Hawthorne woke to another day of ice and secrets. For the first time in years, the answers felt close enough to touch horrific, tangled, but real. Eric looked down at the stack of tapes, the battered yearbooks, the folders thick with evidence. For the girls, for Mark, for the whole town, he would keep going, would keep pulling at every thread until the last of the darkness was dragged into the light. Somewhere, he was sure Grace Patterson was out there, watching, waiting, daring him to find her. And this time he was ready. The wind howled across the old cemetery as Eric and Jenna's boots crunched through the snow, their flashlight beams trembling as they swept the path leading up to St. Agnes Chapel. The evidence they'd uncovered, the tapes, the erased records, the whispers of Grace Patterson and money-changing hands burned in their minds as fiercely as the cold gnawed at their bones. Both had felt it, the unspeakable wrongness lingering in the chapel's shadow, the sense of being watched. They'd chosen to return at night, when whoever was hiding secrets might let down their guard. Their radios were muted guns, holstered at their sides, every sense sharpened to a razor's edge as they nudged the warped chapel door open. Inside, the air was heavy and stagnant. The floor creaked under their weight, dust motes swirling in the thin columns of moonlight, sneaking through the stained glass. Jenna took point, scanning every pew, every niche, as Eric followed close behind, his hand resting on the grip of his pistol. "Let's check the vestry and basement," Jenna whispered. "We need to see if anything's changed." Eric nodded. They moved with measured steps, listening for any hint of movement, breath a creak, the soft scuff of a shoe. Every shadow seemed to ripple. When Jenna reached for the vestry door, it swung open almost soundlessly. The chill from the stairwell below rose up thick with the stench of mildew and burnt wax. They were halfway down the stairs when the door above slammed shut. The echo thundered through the darkness. Jenna whirled flashlight beam, darting pulse leaping into her throat. "Who's there?" she called, voice iron, but trembling. No answer, only the sound of hurried footsteps above the scrape of wood. Eric's mind raced. Was it the tipster or someone else? He gestured for Jenna to keep moving quicker now, and she obeyed. Downstairs, the air was thick and electric with fear. Jenna's light landed on the mural, the faceless girls, the ring of fire now defaced with fresh streaks of black paint. On the table, the cassette recorder was gone. Eric's jaw clenched. Someone's been here, and not long ago. He swept his light along the walls, heart thumping. A side door to a narrow hallway stood open, black as a grave. A sudden rush of footsteps thundered down from above. Without warning, two figures exploded from the darkness at the far end of the basement. Both wore balaclavas and heavy coats, moving with violent, practiced speed. "Down," Eric shouted just as something heavy, an iron pipe, smashed into the wall where Jenna's head had been moments before. She ducked, rolling behind a stack of crates, gun drawn. Eric stepped out, sidearm leveled, flashlight in his other hand. Voice steady. "Police, show your hands." The larger of the two attackers lunged at Eric, swinging the pipe. Eric fired a warning shot into the stone floor, the boom echoing off the concrete. The assailant hesitated, then changed tactics, swinging low and catching Eric's shin. Pain flared white-hot as Eric staggered, dropping his light. The other man darted at Jenna, a blade glinting in his grip. She fired, grazing his shoulder, the bullet slamming into the stone behind him. He screamed, dropping the knife, but he tackled Jenna anyway, knocking her hard to the ground. They grappled, rolling across the filthy floor. Jenna landed a hard punch to his jaw, but he headbutted her, stars bursting in her vision. She twisted, using his own momentum, and sent him crashing against the wall. Meanwhile, Eric was locked in a brutal struggle, blocking another swing from the pipe with his forearm. He landed a punch to his attacker's ribs, but the bigger man barely flinched. Blood from Eric's cut leg seeped into his boot, slowing him. The man tried to wrench the gun from Eric's grip, but Eric bit down on the pain, turned the weapon, and fired again. This time the shot hit flesh, the man screamed, dropping the pipe, stumbling back into the darkness. Suddenly, a whoosh of heat erupted. The smaller man had thrown something at the old curtain near the heater. Flames licked up the rotting fabric, catching dry wood and sending acrid smoke curling along the ceiling. "Jenna, we need to move," Eric yelled, coughing. The attackers disappeared into the smoke boots, pounding up the stairs. Jenna scrambled to her feet, grabbing Eric under the arm. He was limping badly now, face drawn, but his eyes were wild and focused. They lunged for the exit, lungs burning. A rafter crashed to the ground, splinters erupting around them. Jenna shoved Eric through the side door just as flames surged, cutting off their escape back up the main stairs. On hands and knees, they crawled through a narrow service corridor. Eric's mind was a fever of pain and adrenaline, blood slicking his jeans. Jenna's hand gripping his shoulder to keep him moving. The smoke was everywhere, stinging eyes, choking lungs. A sudden sound, a door slamming at the end of the corridor. They weren't alone. Jenna raised her pistol breath, coming in ragged gasps. "Hold still," she whispered to Eric. "I'll check." She edged forward, back, pressed to the stone peeking around the corner. There a shadow flickered, then froze, caught in her flashlight beam. It was a woman, tall and thin face, mostly hidden under a scarf, but her eyes glinted with cold calculation. Next to her, the smaller attacker nursed his bleeding arm. Jenna recognized the eyes. She'd seen them in yearbooks and staff photos. Grace Patterson. Jenna steadied her gun. "Stop right there. Hands where I can see them." Grace laughed low and bitter. "You don't know what you're doing, detective." The man lunged at Jenna, desperate. She fired a warning shot that ricocheted off the pipes. He stopped, cursing, hands high. Eric, dragging himself upright, joined Jenna. He stared at Grace, seeing not just the ghost from the yearbooks, but the hard, haunted lines of a woman who'd lived in fear and anger for too long. Why, Eric managed, voice raw. Why the girls? Why any of this? Grace's lips curled in a sad smile. "You wouldn't understand. Nobody ever did. They never listened, not even when I begged them to stop. It was never supposed to go so far." Jenna's finger tightened on the trigger. "Who helped you?" A crash above the ceiling groaned, flaming debris tumbling into the corridor. The attackers panicked, the man shoving past Grace and barreling into Jenna. She fought him off, wrestling for the gun. Grace ran, disappearing into the smoke. Jenna yelled, "Go after her," to Eric, but he was slumping, losing blood fast. Still, he forced himself forward, following Grace's shadow through the haze, up a narrow staircase he hadn't seen before. He burst into the sacristy just as Grace tried to slip through a side window. He lunged, grabbing her ankle. She kicked hard, connecting with his wounded leg, sending agony stabbing up his side. He lost his grip, fell hard against the altar head, spinning. Grace scrambled out into the cemetery, lost to the night. Jenna, meanwhile, managed to subdue the wounded man, cuffing him to a rusted pipe just as the flames roared louder. She hauled Eric up by his arm, half dragging him through a door she hoped led to air. They staggered out into the graveyard as the old chapel's windows burst fire, painting the snow orange and black. Coughing, dizzy, Eric slumped against a headstone as Jenna called for backup, her hands shaking, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Paramedics arrived within minutes, flooding the graveyard with red and blue light. Firefighters battled the blaze as Jenna gave her statement, voice low and grim. Eric was patched up, his leg wrapped tight, a shot of morphine dulling the pain, but not the fury simmering in his chest. When they finally regrouped, shivering under an ambulance blanket, Jenna pressed a charred wallet into Eric's hand. "Found this by the window," she used. "Look inside." Eric opened it. Inside was a faded Hawthorne staff ID, Grace Patterson guidance counselor. And beneath it, a crumpled receipt from a hardware store dated just 3 days before the purchase of Chain's cleaning fluid and gloves. But it was the photograph that broke the last illusion. A snapshot newer than the others, showing Grace standing at the chapel's back door, arm in arm with a tall, bearded man. On the back, a scrawled note, "Always together. G." Eric stared at the picture, the evidence undeniable. Grace had been here. She'd had help. Jenna's voice was tight, furious, and shaken. "We got his prints on the pipe. He'll talk or I'll make him talk." Eric nodded, teeth clenched against the pain, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "We're close." She scared Jenna. That's why she ran. They both stared back at the burning chapel, the old wood collapsing in on itself. The secrets hidden there were coming apart at last. Somewhere out there, Grace was running. But now they had her scent. Jenna pressed her hand to Eric's shoulder. "You almost died tonight." He managed a weak grin. Would have ruined your night, huh? She laughed, the sound raw but real. Next time, try not to get stabbed, okay? He looked at the photo again, feeling something shift deep inside, a new sense of purpose, sharp and hot as a fresh wound. We're not letting her vanish, not like the girls. As the dawn began to break, Eric leaned against Jenna, letting her hold him upright. The pain was real, but so was the certainty this was the beginning of the end. The game was over. No more shadows, no more hiding. Now it was Grace Patterson's turn to run. The fire at the chapel had left Eric with bandages, a limp, and a heart that couldn't quite settle even as the painkillers dulled his body. He had barely slept in 36 hours. Jenna all but forced him home, but after an hour of staring at the water stains on his apartment ceiling, Eric returned to the station. The world felt like it was closing in, every surface humming with the aftershock of violence, secrets, and the ghost of Grace Patterson. Jenna found him hunched over a mountain of files. Blue flicker from a desk lamp painting his face with shadows. She tossed a bag of takeout on the desk and took her seat, silent as always after a night like theirs. The office was quiet except for the slow ticking of the old wall clock, 3 a.m. Hawthorne time, when only insomniacs and lost souls haunted the world. Eric's phone vibrated, an unknown number, area code out of state. He hesitated. For days now, tips and threats had trickled in since the fire, some anonymous, some cruel, all dead ends. But something in his gut told him to answer. He pressed the phone to his ear. Sheriff Walker, a breath. Silence trembling on the line. Then a woman's voice, strained and careful, like each word had to be pulled through a wall of ice. Is this really Eric? He frowned, heart skipping. Yes. Who is this? The line buzzed with nerves. I don't know if I should have called. But you used to play soccer, right? Your brother was Mark. You came to see the games in the old field. Eric stiffened. The sound of that field. The chilly Saturday mornings, the shouting of his brother's voice, all of it flooded him. Yes, I did. Who is this? Silence again. Then just above a whisper, it's Olivia. Olivia Martin. The world seemed to stop. The wind outside the station faded to nothing, his blood thundering in his ears. That's impossible. Olivia Martin is dead. That's what they told everyone. Her voice cracked. I'm not. Eric's hand trembled, clutching the phone. Where are you? Are you safe? A sigh. I'm safe now. But I haven't been for a long time. I can't meet you in person yet, not until I'm sure. I needed you to know. He tried to steady himself. How did you survive, Olivia? We found nothing. There was nothing. Her breath caught memories colliding with every word. You won't find the others. Not the way you want. Chloe, Madison, Harper, they're gone, Eric. They died there. I was supposed to too, but I didn't. Eric's knuckles whitened around the phone. He motioned Jenna over, put the call on speaker, his voice softer. Olivia, what happened? Please, we need to know. She paused, collecting herself, and her story began to spill out in pieces, broken and stitched together by pain. It started after practice. I always left last, had to lock up, make sure the equipment was away. That night, Grace was waiting. She was different. Empty-eyed, pale. She said she wanted to apologize for the way she'd acted. Said she wanted to make peace. She asked us to follow her just for a minute to the chapel. We all went. We were so stupid. She'd been bullied. We'd laughed at her sometimes, or ignored her. We thought she was just weird, not dangerous. Olivia's voice faltered. She led us into the basement, said she'd left something behind, something important. The men were waiting. I don't know who they were, just that they moved like shadows, like this was something they'd done before. We tried to run. Madison fought. She almost got away. Chloe screamed until they made her stop. Harper begged them. Nothing worked. Eric closed his eyes, picturing the basement, the circles of flame, the faceless mural. What did they want? At first I thought it was money, Olivia whispered. But Grace, she wanted us to feel fear, to pay for what she thought we'd done. The men just wanted control. Maybe more, I don't know. They kept us down there for weeks or months, I lost track. The air was so bad. Sometimes they'd let us out for a few minutes, but always with someone watching. We tried to stay strong, we tried to escape, but it kept getting worse. Jenna's eyes filled with tears. How did you survive? After a while, one of the men stopped coming. Maybe he got arrested, maybe he died. Grace lost control. She'd come in screaming, crying sometimes, hugging us, sometimes threatening. Madison was the first. She tried to protect us. She was hurt bad. Chloe was sick. Harper gave up. I only survived because I hid. I pretended to be unconscious when Grace came down that last night. I heard her crying, telling herself she never meant for this to happen. Then she left. The fire alarms went off. I don't know if someone set them on purpose or if it was just old wiring, but in the chaos I got out through the service corridor. I ran for miles. I didn't stop. I never went home. I didn't want anyone to find me, not after what happened. Eric and Jenna sat stunned. The only sounds Olivia's shaky breathing and the dull throb of pain in Eric's leg. I changed my name. Olivia continued, voice growing steadier. I moved across the country. I cleaned houses, worked in diners, did anything that kept me invisible. I watched the news for years, saw the vigils, saw my own face in old photos. I almost called 100 times, but I couldn't. I was afraid. I thought, if Grace ever found me, if those men ever found me, it would start all over again. Jenna leaned closer to the speaker. Olivia, you're safe now. We're after Grace. She can't hurt you. We need your help. What else do you remember? Anything details, faces, names? A long pause. There was a man with a limp. Older graybeard. I remember his laugh. It was high and nervous, like he was always about to lose control. He argued with Grace a lot. He wanted more money. She threatened him too. There was another guy, never spoke, always watched from the shadows. I think he was the one who took Madison away that night. He wore a ring with a blue stone. Eric scribbled notes. Anything about Grace? Where she went? Who she talked to? After the fire, I heard her yelling on the phone. She said, "We're finished. I'm done. I never want to see you again." I think she was talking to the man with the limp. She packed up and left. I heard tires on gravel. That was the last time I saw her. I waited in the dark for hours before I escaped. Jenna's jaw clenched. Did you ever see her hurt the others, or was it always the men? Olivia's voice was a whisper, raw and shamed. She hurt us. Not always physically, but she made us feel worthless. She'd read our diaries aloud, laughed at our secrets. Sometimes she'd sit in the corner and cry, saying it was all our fault that we'd driven her to it. Madison tried to talk her down, but it only made things worse. In the end, she just wanted someone to notice her pain, no matter the cost. Eric felt tears sting his eyes, rage and heartbreak swirling. I'm sorry, Olivia. For everything. For not finding you. For not seeing the signs. A brittle laugh. It's not your fault, Eric. It's not anyone's, not really. Pain just passes down, I guess. I just want it to stop. He wiped his face. We'll find her. And you can come home if you want to. There are people here who still care. Silence. Then maybe. Someday. But first you have to finish this. Promise me you'll catch her. That you'll let everyone know the truth. Jenna's voice was steady, strong. We promise. The line went quiet. Olivia's voice softer now. Thank you for believing me. Goodbye. Click. The call ended. Jenna and Eric stared at the phone, the magnitude of the revelation crashing through them in waves. After a long silence, Jenna spoke, voice trembling with awe and grief. All this time, she was alive, living in fear all alone. Eric nodded, eyes blazing. We have to move Jenna. We have names, descriptions. The man with the limp, the ring, Grace's habits. We hunt them all down. Jenna squared her shoulders. I'll start running background on every known associate of Grace Patterson. Track old staff lists, police records, hospital reports. If there's a man with a limp, he's not invisible. Eric pulled up the photo they'd found in the burned Chapel Grace with the tall bearded man. He zoomed in on the ring, glinting blue in the man's hand. That's our guy. The room filled with purpose electricity, the sense of something ancient and cruel, finally being forced into the light. The pain in Eric's leg faded. All that mattered was the hunt, the faces of the dead, the voice of the living. Jenna gathered her things, her face set. This ends now. For Olivia. For the others. Eric met her gaze, nodding, the weight of promise burning in his chest. For all of them. Outside, the snow began to fall again, softly this time, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for justice, for the truth to break the last of the winter's grip. The blizzard had arrived, with a vengeance, swallowing Hawthorne in swirling sheets of white. Streetlights flickered and failed under the weight of the storm, their halos shrinking until only memory kept the world illuminated. It was a night that seemed built for secrets and for reckoning. A night that would write the town's final chapter. Eric Walker stood in the center of the parking lot behind the ruined chapel, wind lashing his face, blood thrumming in his ears. His wound had healed badly, every step a flash of pain, but his mind was crystalline with focus. Jenna waited in the shadow of the snowbank, her pistol hidden, her breath pluming in the frozen air. Beside them, barely visible in a thick wool coat and scarf, Olivia Martin waited, fingers twitching, jaw clenched. She was the key, the bait, the last surviving witness, the only one who knew what it would take to draw out Grace Patterson and her accomplice. They'd spent days planning, poring over every phone call, every shred of evidence, every scar in Olivia's story. They'd made contact using Olivia's old phone, the number leaked into the right dark corners, hints left for the man with the limp, the bearded face from the photograph. Jenna ran the logistics patrol cars, stationed out of sight, comms checked and double-checked. Eric's only job was to keep Olivia safe and keep his heart from breaking every time he saw her flinch at an unexpected noise. A text came through, cutting through the static of the storm. Here. Olivia's hands trembled. Jenna squeezed her shoulder, grounding her. Remember, you're not alone, she whispered. Headlights broke through the snow, a dark SUV grinding up the drive. The door creaked open. Grace Patterson stepped out, face, gaunt eyes rimmed red. Every movement a study in desperation and determination. She looked older, the years written in harsh lines and the cold calculation of someone who has lost everything and now has nothing left to lose. Beside her emerged the bearded man, Frank Calloway, the town's forgotten son, known only to a handful of people in Hawthorne, now revealed by the ring, with the blue stone gleaming in the dim light. He limped just as Olivia remembered, every step leaving a dent in the snow. Olivia Grace called, voice brittle as glass. I knew you'd come back. I told him you would. The storm howled, filling the silence between words with something old and raw. Olivia stepped forward, her voice steady despite the quaver in her spine. I didn't come back for you, Grace. I came to finish what you started, to end it. Grace's expression twisted, a flicker of pain and regret crossing her face. You were never supposed to get hurt. I only wanted you to understand what you did to me. What all of you did. Eric and Jenna fanned out, circling behind the SUV, their weapons drawn, but hidden. Frank's eyes darted from Grace to Olivia to the darkness, animal and untrusting. He reached inside his coat and pulled out a pistol, pointing it toward the ground. Eric called out, voice cutting through the wind. Frank Calloway, it's over. Drop your weapon. Frank's eyes flickered with fear and fury. I'm not going back, he spat. You don't know what they did. You don't know what any of them did. Jenna stepped into the half-light, her badge glinting. This is your last chance, Frank. There's nowhere left to run. The moment hung suspended, a tableau carved in ice and heartbreak. Grace looked at Olivia, her face crumpling. You were just girls. I was supposed to protect you, but no one ever protected me. Olivia's voice shook, but she stood her ground. You hurt us, Grace. You became what you hated. I'll never understand why you let it go so far, but I won't let you destroy anyone else. Frank's hand trembled on the pistol. Eric stepped closer, gun aimed low. It ends tonight, Frank. Drop it. Frank's face twisted in indecision. Then suddenly he aimed at Eric and fired a wild shot, swallowed by the storm, missing by inches. Jenna dove behind the car glass, shattering as bullets ripped through the windows. Olivia screamed and dropped to her knees. Eric sprinted forward, ignoring the pain in his leg, tackling Frank to the snow. The gun skittered away. Frank clawed at Eric's face, trying to break free, but Eric pinned him down, blood from his old wound mixing with the freezing slush. Jenna leaped over the hood, pinning Frank's legs. With a final gasp of effort, Eric wrenched Frank's arms behind his back, snapping on the cuffs. Grace ran. Olivia staggered after her, calling her name through the howling wind. Eric shouted, "Olivia, wait!" but she pressed on, chasing Grace into the white abyss. Jenna stayed with Frank, pressing him into the snow, calling for backup. Eric limped after Olivia, heart pounding. The blizzard became a maze. Trees looming out of nowhere, drifts up to their knees. Olivia caught up with Grace at the edge of the woods, both women gasping for breath. Why, Olivia screamed above the storm. Why did you let us die? Grace collapsed to her knees, sobbing. You all laughed at me. All those years. You broke me. No one saw how much it hurt. Olivia knelt beside her, voice ragged. You could have stopped. We were just kids, Grace. We were stupid, but we didn't deserve this. Grace rocked back and forth, arms wrapped around herself. I tried to forgive you. I really did. But it never left me. The pain. I just wanted to be seen. To matter. Eric found them, gasping, snow stinging his face. He leveled his weapon, chest heaving. Grace, it's over. There's nothing left to destroy. Grace looked up, tears streaking her face, hands held out in surrender. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted someone to help me. Eric's voice was softer now, full of an ache deeper than pain. We can't undo what happened, but we can stop it here. Let us help you. Let Olivia live. Let yourself be seen finally for the truth. Grace bowed her head, finally defeated. Eric cuffed her gently, reading her rights as Olivia sobbed beside her, her shoulders shaking with a decade's worth of grief and fear. As the patrol cars arrived, lights flashing through the storm, Jenna emerged with Frank, his head bowed, fury gone. Medics rushed to Eric and Olivia, checking wounds, wrapping them in blankets. Jenna put her arm around Olivia, tears streaming down her cheeks, relief and heartbreak warring in her eyes. And then through the swirl of blue and red lights, a pair of headlights appeared. Olivia's parents' faces aged by sorrow, and years stumbled from their car, disbelief and hope written across their faces. Olivia stood on trembling legs, wrapped in the medic's blanket, staring at them as if seeing ghosts. Her mother broke first, rushing across the snow, gathering Olivia in her arms, sobbing with joy and agony all at once. Her father followed, hands shaking as he cupped Olivia's face, repeating her name as if to wake her from a dream. Olivia wept, buried against her mother's coat, letting herself be held as she had not been since childhood. I'm here, Mom. I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry it took so long. Her mother shook her head, kissing her hair. Don't you ever apologize. You're home. You're home. Eric and Jenna stood back, giving the family space as the storm raged on. The other officers formed a loose circle, heads bowed in awe and respect. In the chaos, something fragile and luminous began to bloom. A sense of hope that even the deepest wounds could heal, that the truth could survive the coldest winter. For the first time in years, Hawthorne witnessed not just the end of pain, but the beginning of something new. The story once written in fear now found space for forgiveness. Jenna squeezed Eric's hand, her voice barely audible. We did it. Eric shook his head, tears glistening in his eyes. Olivia did it. She survived. The snow fell and fell, erasing footprints, softening the scars left behind. Olivia stood in the center of her family, a survivor. At last the town's ghosts laid to rest for tonight at least. The reckoning was over. In its wake, love and hope and forgiveness glowing through the storm, enough to guide Hawthorne into the dawn. Dawn crawled across Hawthorne with the fragile hush that follows a storm. The streets still shimmered with frost and blown snow, every yard marked by the jagged ruts of police and emergency vehicles. But the air had changed. The night's secrets exhumed from the frozen earth now drifted over the town like a hush, every family, every neighbor, aware that something irreparable had been broken and perhaps finally something else mended. In the temporary holding cell at the police station, Grace Patterson sat with her wrists chained to a cold steel table, her hair-matted eyes bruised by a decade of rage and grief. Gone was the icy composure she'd worn during the storm. Her hands trembled, her lips parted, as if still mouthing the apologies she could never make, her gaze fixed on a spot just beyond the bars, as if watching some past version of herself walk away for the last time. Eric Walker stood on the other side of the glass, his legs stiff but his back straight. He had not slept, his head heavy with every confession, every lost chance, every voice that would never again be heard except in memory. Olivia Martin's statement was tucked inside his jacket, already signed and sealed. Jenna, standing beside him, pressed her hand to his shoulder, a silent gesture of solidarity. Their own ghosts finally laid to rest. It was time for Grace to speak. Detective Carl Henson, flown in from the county to oversee the statement, sat across from Grace, his voice even but gentle. "You know why you're here, Ms. Patterson. You have the right to remain silent, but now is your chance to tell your story. We want to understand what happened." Grace's lips twitched a bitter imitation of a smile. "You want the truth? After all these years?" Henson nodded. "The truth, Grace. No more running." Grace looked down, fingers twisting in her lap. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. "I wasn't always a monster," she began, voice trembling but clear. "I came to Hawthorne to teach, to help kids like me, the ones no one saw. I was so full of hope at first. I believed I could change things, but you don't understand what it's like to be invisible, to eat lunch alone every day, to hear them laughing in the halls and know it's always about you." They were beautiful, those girls, so full of light, so quick to dismiss anyone who didn't fit their world. Madison, Chloe, Harper, even Olivia at first. They had everything I didn't. I thought if I could just reach them, just show them I cared, maybe they'd let me in. But all I got was more laughter, more notes on my desk, more pranks. Until I broke. Her voice grew colder, sharper, her pain now exposed and raw. I told myself I was punishing them for what they did to me. But the truth is, I wanted them to see me just once, just long enough to know I mattered. So I planned. I found Frank. He was angry too, at the school, at the world. He needed money, I needed help. We made a deal. She described the night in meticulous detail, how she lured the girls with an apology, how Frank and the others waited in the shadows, how the plan spiraled out of control the moment the door slammed shut. They screamed, they begged, and for a while I didn't care. But then I saw myself, really saw myself. I'd become the thing I hated most, a monster made from pain. There were nights I tried to let them go. I almost called for help, but Frank threatened me, said he'd go to the police, said I'd rot in prison. By the end, I couldn't tell who was the prisoner and who was the jailer. When Olivia disappeared, I thought she'd died too, but she got away. I saw her running a ghost in the snow, and for a moment I almost followed her, almost asked for forgiveness. But I was too far gone. There was no way back. Tears streamed down her face now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You have to believe me, I never meant for any of this. I just wanted someone to help me. But I kept waiting, and no one ever came. Not until it was too late." The statement was recorded, every word echoing in the sterile room. Outside the cell, Eric and Jenna listened, their faces pale and drawn, the weight of Grace's pain mingling with their own sense of anger, pity, and deep, exhausted relief. The news broke before lunch. Hawthorne was never meant for scandal. But in the age of digital media, the story exploded. Teacher confesses to orchestrating infamous cheerleader disappearance. Tragedy and revenge in small-town Canada. Reporters descended on the courthouse cameras, flashing satellite trucks parked in front of the school. National networks called for interviews. Talk radio blared with outrage and disbelief. Parents huddled on front porches, watching the world's gaze turn on their quiet, snowbound lives. Court dates were set. Grace Patterson was charged with multiple counts of kidnapping, involuntary manslaughter, conspiracy, and abuse of a minor. Frank Calloway and his surviving accomplices were charged as co-conspirators, their faces plastered across every screen. Hawthorne's school board was called to testify about past complaints, missing money, and the culture of silence that had let so much darkness flourish just beneath the surface. Olivia's name appeared in headlines, first as a ghost, then as a miracle survivor returns after a decade in hiding. For weeks, journalists camped outside her mother's house. Olivia refused every interview. She moved quietly through the town, a living testament to the complexity of survival. Neither a martyr nor a symbol, just a woman haunted by the cost of endurance. For the families, the trial was a brutal resurrection of grief. Madison's mother sobbed in the front row, clutching her daughter's scarf. Chloe's father testified with a voice roughened by years of anger, admitting his own failings, weeping openly for the girl he'd lost and the woman she would never become. Harper's little brother sat alone in the back, face hidden in his hands. And yet, through the chaos, something else began to grow, a conversation that the town had avoided for years. School counselors organized meetings. Survivors of bullying parents, teachers, and students shared stories. The old shame was dragged into daylight, stories of pranks gone too far, of teachers looking the other way, of pain festering until it turned on itself. The principal resigned in tears, owning up to the cowardice that let so much suffering go unchecked. The town's new mayor announced scholarships in the girls' names, counseling programs, and a permanent memorial on the steps of the rebuilt gym. Grace's trial unfolded with an intensity rarely seen in small towns. The courtroom was packed every day. Parents, students, reporters, lawyers. Grace sat behind glass, her confession replayed for the jury, her tears no longer hidden. The defense tried to paint her as a woman broken by the system, failed by every adult who should have protected her. The prosecution reminded everyone that broken people could still do monstrous things. In the end, the jury found her guilty. But Olivia called to testify, asked for leniency. On the stand, Olivia's voice shook but never broke. Grace hurt us. She took away my friends, my future. But she wasn't born this way. She was made by pain, too. If you lock her away forever, nothing changes. Someone else will take her place. Let this be the end. Let's choose forgiveness and something better. The judge, visibly moved, sentenced Grace to a lengthy term, but included mandatory psychological treatment and a recommendation for parole if she showed true remorse. Frank Calloway and the others were given harsher sentences, no redemption, just justice. The verdict rocked the town, but it did not break it. In the weeks that followed, Hawthorne was forced to reckon with its past. Families gathered in living rooms and school auditoriums, telling the truth at last about bullying, silence, complicity, and the courage it takes to stop the cycle. For some, it was too late for forgiveness. For others, it was the first step toward healing. Olivia returned home, the prodigal daughter, the living heart of the story. At first, she and her mother circled each other like strangers, awkward, afraid to touch the wounds that still bled beneath the surface. But gradually, with every shared meal, every late-night cup of tea, they found their way back. One snowy evening, Olivia sat with her mother by the window, watching the town lights twinkle through the frost. She traced the scars on her arms, the physical reminders of the years lost, and finally spoke her truth. I thought if I ran far enough, hid long enough, it would stop hurting, she whispered. But pain doesn't go away. It just changes shape. I see Madison, Chloe, Harper every night when I close my eyes. I hear their voices, and I wonder why I was the one who lived. But I don't want to hide anymore. I want to remember them not as victims, but as my friends. I want to forgive Grace, not because she deserves it, but because I do. I want to come home. Her mother took her hand, squeezing tight. I'm sorry for all the times I didn't see you, for all the times I let my fear win. You don't have to be strong all the time. You just have to be here. They cried together, not for what was lost, but for the promise of what could still be found. In that moment, healing began not as some dramatic epiphany, but as the slow, steady unraveling of shame and the beginning of forgiveness, one breath at a time. Outside, Hawthorne was quieter than it had been in years. The snow fell gently on the new memorial, where flowers and photographs gathered in silent tribute. Jenna visited often, pausing to read the names etched in stone. Eric, limping but whole, returned to his rounds, the weight in his chest lighter with every step. The town did not forget, but it finally learned to speak, to reach out, to refuse to let pain have the last word. And as Olivia stood at the memorial one morning, fingers brushing her friends' names, she whispered her own silent vow not to be defined by what had been taken, but by what she still had left the courage to love, to forgive, and to hope. The story of Hawthorne would echo for years, a story of tragedy, yes, but also of healing. Of broken things, made new, of voices finally heard, of forgiveness, blooming even in the heart of winter. The storm had passed. The truth had come home. And in its wake, life stubborn and beautiful began again. Spring comes late to Hawthorne. But when it does, it bursts through the ice like forgiveness, sudden, bright, impossible to ignore. This year, the thaw felt different. The air was filled with a hush of possibility. The trees on Main Street crowned with pale buds, sunlight sparkling off the last of the snowmelt. For the first time in years, no one looked over their shoulder. The storm had passed. The town was ready to remember and begin again. On a gentle April evening, townspeople gathered in front of Hawthorne High. The old gym was gone, replaced by a new facade. But at its heart stood something that would last longer than any season. The memorial wall. The wind-sealed wall. Stone and glass forged by hands from every corner of Hawthorne, parents, teachers, former students, construction workers who had once been teammates or rivals of the lost. It was tall and graceful, each name etched deep into its surface. Every letter was lit by hundreds of candles flickering against the dusk. The crowd was silent as Olivia, wrapped in a simple blue shawl, approached the microphone. Her mother stood close by, hands clasped, a steadying presence. Jenna and Eric watched from the front row, their eyes shining with the weight and promise of all they had survived. Olivia took a breath, her voice steady but soft. One by one she read the names: Madison Lee, Chloe, Barrett, Harper Ellis. The girls lost but not forgotten, and then the names of the survivors, her own trembling at the edge of hope. Each name was met with a candle lit, a moment of silence that shimmered with love and longing. Children pressed close to their parents. Old rivalries seemed to dissolve in the spring air. No one whispered about scandal or blame. Instead, they shared stories about friendship, mistakes, healing. The mayor spoke about what had changed: counselors, hired scholarships in the girls' names, a pledge never to let silence or shame take root again. A teacher sang an old song from the squad's last championship game, her voice carrying clear into the twilight. Jenna pressed Eric's hand, her smile full of tears. He looked up at the wall, the wind-sealed wall, Buktung Kinja, and felt something inside him lift, a release he hadn't known he needed. Olivia stepped down and hugged her mother, both of them sobbing with gratitude and relief, the kind that only comes when pain is finally given voice. All around them, people who had once turned away now reached out, lighting candles, embracing old friends and new. The message was clear: Hawthorne was not a place defined by tragedy, but by the courage it took to face it, by the choice to remember, by the will to forgive. As dusk deepened, Eric stepped forward, Jenna and Olivia beside him, and for a long moment, the three stood before the wall. Its smooth surface shimmered with reflected candlelight, names glowing, hope blooming out of grief. Around them, laughter mingled with quiet tears. The town, for the first time in memory, felt whole. In the end, it wasn't vengeance or outrage that had restored them. It was something softer, something harder to practice but more powerful: compassion. The understanding that wounds do not heal through anger or forgetting, but through empathy, forgiveness, and the courage to hold one another up, even when the wind howls hardest. The memorial would stand as a reminder not only to mourn, but to begin again. In Hawthorne, a new generation would grow up knowing the story, but not living in its shadow. Pain would not be passed down, only hope. And as the candles flickered in the dark, the wind-sealed wall holding every name safe, Eric found himself weeping, but smiling too. Forgiveness, true forgiveness, was not forgetting. It was remembering together and choosing to love anyway. That was how Hawthorne would endure from one generation to the next.